All right, let's pick back up with the money, because the money to me is very interesting. What we funded to them, what it says about us, and now you touched on it a minute ago, whether we're prepared to, in the form of, quote, aid or some other way, start funding the Taliban, which is close with Al-Qaeda, no matter what the press tells you, and its resurgence. I mean, we could be in a position where the American taxpayer is funding the very terrorist group that we went to Afghanistan to fight 20 plus years ago.
Well, it's much worse than that, Megyn, because we already are funding the Taliban. We've let them hold on to $80 billion worth of military equipment. And what most Americans don't know is that it literally is as quick as the flick of a switch for us to destroy every attack helicopter and airplane and armored vehicle that is now in the hands of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And it is important to address this point of Taliban versus Al-Qaeda versus the Haqqani network and ISIS. What people are constantly deceived about is that all of these groups have the same goal. They may fight with each other for power and vie for position and so on, but essentially they all adhere to the ideology of Al-Qaeda, which is the ideological base of the global jihad for every Islamic terrorist group fighting anywhere in the world. And what you're actually looking at with the Islamic Emirate of the Taliban, this government that they have announced, this is the foundation of Osama bin Laden's caliphate. There, if you look now at Lebanon and Syria and Yemen and Libya, these are the other caliphates, right? These are the other Islamic Emirates, and they will form and join to form the entire caliphate in the end. They're working on one in Nigeria as we speak. That's why, so many people, Muslims and Christian, but they're mostly Christians, are being slaughtered every day. This is part of Osama bin Laden's plan. And what is really hard to understand is why would the Biden administration or any administration do this to the United States of America? Why would we give victory to Al-Qaeda on the 20th anniversary of 9/11? And not just Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas, every Islamic terrorist group and every terrorist group in the world now sees that the United States, the leader of the free world, the nation that is supposed to stand for democracy and supposed to stand for liberty and freedom as a way of life, is now saying, wow, we're okay with the fact that you don't believe in freedom and that you rule by fear. And in fact, not only are we okay with it, we're going to endorse it, we're going to legitimize it, we're going to lie about it to our people because they know the US is lying, and we're going to fund it for you. So it's like, I feel like we've gone into insanity land, and people say to me, well, that makes no sense. Why would they do that? I cannot answer that question. That is a question for those leaders to answer. It's a question for Americans to ask of their leaders. It doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. It's way too late for partisan politics to have any relevance here whatsoever. We're fighting for our survival, and we're fighting for the survival of the American dream and the American idea. That is what is being obliterated right now. And with every person who is killed in the Panjshir Valley, where the Afghan government forces, the special operations troops who are fighting against all the odds. Megyn, can you imagine? I mean, the US was mocked and, and sort of ridiculed for 20 years of building Afghan forces, and look what you did, they just collapsed. Why would we participate in that false narrative? The Afghan special operations forces and commandos that are in the Panjshir Valley now, I mean, they are in a desperate humanitarian situation because there's 250,000 people there with them who need food and who need medical supplies. But they have inflicted massive losses on Taliban forces. They're holding out against Pakistan, China, Russia, US armor, US assets, air power, and they are still fighting. They're still holding their ground, and they're willing to fight to the death for their freedom. So to every person who calls Afghanistan a failed American experiment, you are dishonoring some of the bravest people on the face of the earth who truly believe in freedom because they're willing to give their lives for it. So don't demean them and patronize them and dismiss them and ignore them, because in so doing, you are sowing the seeds for the end of everything that you value in this country. The end of American authority and moral authority on the world stage and American power.
And what's clear is we don't seem to care. Our president doesn't seem much to care about that. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, was out there just this weekend sounding very cavalier about what's about to happen there and then back stateside as a result to us. Listen to him.
Is the U.S. safer today since the U.S. has withdrawn from Afghanistan?
Well, this is something that I've thought a lot about, and I personally think that my military estimate is that the conditions are likely to develop of a civil war. I don't know if the Taliban is going to be able to consolidate power and establish governance. They may be, maybe not, but I think there's at least a very good probability of a broader civil war, and that will then in turn lead to conditions that could in fact lead to a reconstitution of Al-Qaeda or a growth of ISIS or other myriad of terrorist groups. So I think the short answer to your question is we don't know yet, but the conditions are very likely, in my opinion, that, and I've testified this and I've said it in public, that you could see a resurgence of terrorism coming out of that general region within 12, 24, 36 months.
OMG. What? Right? Like that seems like something we should have factored in.
Oh, Megyn, there's just not a single thing in there. There's nothing left of General Milley that speaks to integrity and honesty and good standing. He has failed this country in every possible respect, and the soldiers under his command, and the American people and the Afghan people, because he knows he's lying. I mean, this is what people really need to factor in when they try to make up their minds about what is true and what isn't. General Milley knows more than you. He knows more than me. He knows more than every American out there, right? He knows that there's already a civil war in Afghanistan. He knows that Al-Qaeda never left. He knows that some of the most senior figures in Al-Qaeda returned already from Pakistan and are working with the Afghan Al-Qaeda, Siraj Haqqani, that's the Haqqani network, and who is a designated terrorist. General Milley and General Austin, all of these people, they had soldiers on the ground in the fight, right? I mean, they have seen the remains of U.S. servicemen coming back. Do you know what they did, Megyn? Siraj Haqqani, who was designated as a foreign terrorist in 2012, who the Taliban has named as their, interior minister in their new government, he has been in charge of security in Kabul from the moment the Taliban entered. You know why? Because the Haqqani network has always owned Kabul. They are responsible for most of the terrorist attacks in that city. It's their natural terrain. They are the same people who are most likely responsible for the bombing of U.S. forces that killed 13 Americans and over 100 Afghans. More than 80% of the bombs used in Kabul have been traced to 2 fertilizer factories in Pakistan by the head of the Joint Special Operations Task Force, JAEDO, that was set up to counter IEDs. So all of these generals, they know exactly what's going on the ground. They know that the soldiers they trained are fighting in the mountains in the Panjshir Valley. They know that they have been killing the Taliban fighters in extraordinary numbers. They know that there's a stench of death rising from the floor of the valley, from all of the unclaimed bodies. And this is not by any means, a great situation for any of the people involved. They're under an extraordinary amount of pressure. They are at risk of running out of ammo. They're low on food and so on. But you know what they have on their side? The truth, because they're fighting for something noble and they're fighting with dignity. And also, they know the terrain. There's snow in the mountains, Megyn, and winter is coming.